Hey YouTube, this is Alex again, doing another video on the Universal Audio Rooms plugin from Oceanway Studio. If you watched the last video, I did one on how I use the Rooms plugin, or the Oceanway Studios plugin, to create fake rooms in the context of a drum set. If you don't have fake rooms, or real rooms rather, set up in your studio, but you want to still bring in some of the room sound, you can kind of emulate those. The other use that I have for this is kind of reinforcing some of the kick and the snare. So I got a session recently, or not too long ago, where one of the requests was to make the kick and the snare a little more kind of beefy. And without going overboard on EQing more low end or compressing it harder, I found another way to essentially turn it from something like this into this. So as you can hear, it kind of takes a little bit more of the kick and the snare and brings it up a little bit more in the mix. It is a little louder, so you'd probably want to balance that a bit more, just to get it to blend in correctly. But it does add a little bit more kind of ambience around the kick and the snare. And the way that I'm doing this is by creating a second auxiliary channel that I have named Room Beef, so that seemed appropriate. And I'm taking that same plugin, so I have the fake rooms kind of set up in here, and these are just kind of the settings I'm using with this. So this is what the room mics sound like, and what I've done is just copied over this plugin and these exact settings onto a duplicate channel strip or auxiliary. I'll take off the other effects here, and just done a same send on that, but with just the kick and the snare. I adjusted, sometimes I adjust the distance for that as well. So as you can hear on this, it's really just got the kick and the snare going through. You can hear a little bit of the bleed from the hi-hat mic, or the hi-hat from the snare mic, but it's primarily kick and snare. So if you were to just add this in, this is without the room mics here, here you do get a little more of that kind of beefiness out of the kick and snare. You can exaggerate that a little bit more. The way I'm doing this, I've got to get better on turning my mail off. Sorry. You can add a gate after this, and this kind of tightens up the overall transient of it. So as you can see on here, I've just got it set up so that every time the kick and the snare hits, it's just kind of letting it through real quick and then clamping down on it, so there's almost no sustain. Because without that gate, you're hearing a little bit more of the decay, which is pretty similar to how the room mic is set up, but you wouldn't necessarily want as much of that if you just want to reinforce the initial hit rather than the whole sustain of it. So by putting the gate and then timing it so that it's just coming through and it cuts off almost immediately. Turn this up a little bit here too. It's a very unnatural sounding beat at this point. Use it for a song, I guess. But when it's blended in, it kind of reinforces a little bit more of that attack from the kick and the snare. And what I'll usually do is compress it a little bit beforehand as well, so it's hitting the gate a little more evenly. And when it's compressing it also, it's kind of naturally taking the sustain of it and boosting that a little bit too. So it gets a little bit of a different sustain tail, I guess, on it afterwards if you put the compressor before. You can also put it after, and it kind of evens out the gate even further, so it sounds kind of like that. But personally, I like it a little better a little bit before. It's not a huge difference, and honestly, it kind of depends on the mix that you're doing. And then for extra flavor, you can even do a transient designer. So what that does is just exaggerates even further the attack of it. So if I crank this up, you're really getting a lot of that transient detail there. Or you can even bring up some of the room sound, make it sound more or less like it's gated. Actually, that's pretty cool. So with a lot of this, you can just kind of blend that in however subtly you would like. So just running through this again, this is without and that's kind of with adding in that extra kick and snare beef channel. So with the Transient Designer, you can get a little bit more of the attack on there. Although with that, it does sound like it's almost flamming a little bit on the snare notes there. And that's the main thing. You just want to watch out on, how you're using this, make sure it doesn't interfere with the actual drum hits. But the idea here is to just kind of blend this in to the point where it's going to be noticeable, but not, take away from the rest of the drum mix, unless you want to go like for some, super 80s style Billie Jean remix or something. So, but yeah, that's just a quick way to add a little bit more beef to your kick and your snare without having to do a whole lot of EQing or processing. You could probably do this with the reverb a little bit as well, but like in the last video, I think the Ocean Way Studios plugin does a little bit better job of that because it sounds more natural with the initial sample that you're putting into it, or in this case, a recorded audio, because you're hearing more of the actual audio and not as much of the reverb tail or the pre-delay on it. It's mixed in and blended better with the actual room sound itself. So that's pretty much it for this video. Let me know what you guys think, how you would use this, and I'll see you guys soon.